Hi, I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. I'm back here in my Western Hamden yard where I condensed everything to make them single brood chambers and started the feeding process. I'm also going to check mite levels. As I said, we have more bees than the colonies can hold right now, but there's no field bees out at the moment, and it is humid, so we've got a particularly high amount of clustering outside the hives. But we can see that all the hives have a good population of bees, which is a good start for the winter. But also what I'm going to do now is check to see how these guys have fared for mites. They were treated for mites about 6 weeks ago, maybe 7, and we're just going to see what mite levels are like now in them. Provided I can find the queen. It's been 3 days since I set these feeders on, and gallon feeders are empty, which is not a surprise considering how light they were. I remembered my smoker, but I forgot my smoker fuel, so I'm going to have to see how these bees cope with that. Because I don't want to stir them up. They're full of field bees. I can already tell they're not going to be very pleasant. It will be something if I can find the queen right away. Well, let's see. Good. I've stored a lot of food. This is all new, brand new. It's been stored in the last few days. So it just shows how quickly they can start filling up combs. The all white cappings with a bit of yellow on it, and they're filling out this side. They'll probably build this comb out if we keep this flow of nectar into them. Filling this out. These outside combs were mostly empty 3 days ago. Now, I don't think I actually went into the brood chamber of this hive, so I can't be 100% certain of that. But I can see plenty of brood. Nice brood chamber there. Backfilling a lot. Well, the queen's laying a lot of eggs as well. So I don't want to overdo it. So I want them to rear plenty of brood. And also to get a mite treatment in. Yeah, they've backfilled a lot of hive. They've backfilled so much here, it's unbelievable. 3 frames of brood here. Really solid sheets of brood. So even though these colonies were under some real stress in terms of how much nectar was coming in before, they've just filled them up with brood. I mean, look at all this brood here. Sheets and sheets comb full of brood. And the spaces now not filled with brood are filled with pollen, and now some sugar syrup. Lots of pollen, lots of sugar syrup, lots of cat brood. Now, I don't want to fill them with food too much too soon, because I want them to continue to be able to rear brood. So I may not feed this hive too quickly, because I've got to be careful that I don't crowd them out. Let them rear brood a little longer. Don't see the queen yet. Yep. Open brood in this frame, and the open brood I see looks nice and wet. And wet means well fed. Lots of brood, lots of pollen, lots of honey stroke sugar syrup. Now this colony must have been in pretty good shape before I condensed things down, at least down in the brood chamber, because I didn't feed them this much sugar syrup. So a good deal of this is honey. The problem with look at all that honey now, freshly capped. Problem with trying to do a sample at the moment is that it's really hard to get in here and find the queen. So I'm going to skip this one. Can't find the queen here. But I'm going to go into a hive that I did go through the brood chamber on Friday, and I know it was dry. We'll see how it's changed. Okay, let's look over this way instead. There's a bit of sugar syrup left in here. Now, cluster doesn't go out to the edge here, so these combs that were empty remain empty. This comb I'm pretty sure was dry before. Now full of sugar syrup, which is great. At least part of it is. I think this comb was pretty dry too. And this is filling with sugar syrup. Look how calm, motionless these bees are. A few bees flying around, but on the comb, really gentle. Now, just wanted to get some samples just to tell me how things are going, but I can already see in here how things have been going. Full of bees, and generally from my other samples, season after season after season, I find that the need to treat for mites at this time of year. And there's the queen finally. Beautiful looking queen here. So I will take a sample while I have the chance. Mixture of open brood and cap brood. And I'll close this up. Alcohol in. Field bees have flown out. Half cup of bees. And these bees can go back. Look in there. I see 1, 2, 3. 4. 2, 3, 4. This hive got treated for mites about 6 weeks ago. Let's see. 5, 6. We're in the 7th week now. And I could see 3 or 4 mites in there. So 3 or 4 mites. It's very close to time to treat these hives again. As I say, time after time, I'll go into yards and find the same thing over again. Right. So that most of these colonies all have some honey left in the feeder. I mean, some sugar syrup left in their feeder. Some are empty. But I've got an open feeder going on here. There are not many colonies in this area. So I'm going to put a bit of open feed here as well. I've already got some sugar syrup in here. I'm just going to top it up with a little bit more. As right now, there's enough going on in those hives without putting the feeder to them. They're better off running for a few days without a feeder in there. So I'll come back in 4 or 5 days, top up the feeders, and just for now, this will keep them bees going. There are very few hives, colonies managed in this area. So I've got very little concern about open feeding here. As it is near starvation conditions, these bees are all over the feeder, having just put a little bit in there. So I know these colonies won't starve. They're now into their second course of mite treatment, and just 4 in that sample wasn't threshold. I want to make sure that I separate out my mite treatments, because I know at the end of the time for that we'll consider mite treatments, at the end of the brood rearing season, I'll be going around with oxalic acid to mop up any mites that have been brought in by robbing. Okay, so I decided that safety is the better course of action for mites. They're approaching treatment time, and again, experience always tells me it's best as soon as the brood have emerged from the hive to get an oxalic acid treatment in just before the bees close up for winter. So at the time that the bees have stopped flying, I'm going around with an oxalic acid treatment. And so to space that out and to make sure that the remainder of the brood rearing season for bees to rear the brood for overwintering, I want to make sure there's a mite treatment in them now. So given that other yards are starting to show growth in mites again, in addition to my Hamden yard, which wasn't treated in the first place, but hives treated already are showing mites coming back again, it's time to get around all my yards and treat with Formic Pro again. We've got a great window of opportunity weather-wise now, so there's no risk associated with heat. So this is a great treatment to use, because I really want to have all of those colonies with a nice clean bunch of brood raised in September and early October, because these are the bees that are going to go through the winter. Putting Formic Pro on disrupts the brood cycle. It disrupts, maybe the queen stops laying for 4 or 5 days, and I'd far rather that be in early September than late September, because I want there to be enough space for her to lay still once this mite treatment is done, so that they can rear a nice big cluster. So that's why I'm not going to overfeed now. I fed because I was concerned some of these colonies are near starvation, and I put some open feed there to make sure that they continue to do some filling up, but there's plenty of room. I'm only effectively giving them the gallon that I gave them before and a bit more than that through the open feed, just to make sure that there's no risk of starvation. The brood chamber remains nice and healthy and well fed for the brood that's there. But I want to make sure that when the mite treatment is done, or nearing being done, and the queen starts laying again in 4, 5, 6 days from now, that there's still plenty of space for her to rear a whole bunch of new clean brood. And as that cat brood emerges, relatively mite-free, she'll be laying new eggs in a relatively mite-free environment as well, and they will be emerging in October. And once they emerge, the backfilling, well, they'll be emerging end of September, early October. No, still September. So they will be emerging end of September, and they will then be backfilled with sugar syrup. So this feeding will continue in September and October, but I don't want to do it too quickly now, because I don't want them to eliminate all the brood space that the queen could lay in. Once she's laid in them, then they can start backfilling as heavily as they like. So I want it filled one more time before we go into the winter. So that's the plan. This yard, that's now 2 yards in Hampden treated, and time to get on to some others. I'm Peter Cowan, the Bee Whisperer. If you haven't treated your hives for mites, start doing it now. See you next time.